So, something different today. I've interviewed Carl Magnus Palm about ABBA a few times already. You know, he's the ABBA historian that's written so many books about ABBA. And this interview coincides with the release of the paperback version of his book, Bright Lights, Dark Shadows, the definitive biography of ABBA. Now, the paperback version is an updated version. So we're going to talk about that. But the focus of this interview really is the top 10 ABBA songs according to Spotify on the 2nd of October, 2024. And Carl is going to give a snippet of information about each of those songs that you may not know. So we're going to look at a top 10 from 10 to 1. Guess what the number 1 is? And we're going to find out information that you and I may not know.
The thing to know about ABBA and how they went about making their music is that they always had like a working title, or usually had a working title. They even recorded a version of it with Bjorn on, just random French phrases. I think they had 9 songs and they were happy with them. They re-recorded the song completely, the backing track, everything. Have you heard the news? Did you hear it, Jack?
Before we start, just time for me to ask you to become a member of the channel because it helps me. And if you become a Two Tribes member, that's the second tier of membership, you'll be able to watch every new interview earlier than the non-members. Now, let's get to the interview with Carl Magnus Palm about the paperback version of the definitive biography of ABBA, and also some really fascinating facts you may not know about the top 10 ABBA tracks according to Spotify. Carl Magnus Palm, ABBA historian, welcome. You've just released the paperback version of Bright Lights, Dark Shadows, the definitive biography of ABBA. Why now?
Well, this book was first published in 2001, and I'm proud to say that it has never been out of print since then. So it's been reissued a couple of times, revised and updated. But the last time we did that was in 2014. So it's been 10 years. So I felt, and the publisher felt, it was high time to go through it again. So, update it with the events of the past 10 years, and also go through the entire book and, add corrections and add new information that has come to light of, the career the group had in the 1970s.
I mean, what's really fascinating with you and uh, your interest and all the books that you've done on ABBA is also the access that you have had to certain information, certain recordings, things that other people haven't had. How have you been able to get that access? And how have, particularly, I would think, Benny and Bjorn been to you about these books?
The access, I think the early access came because I was there at the time. I started doing my ABBA research in the early 90s, just before the big ABBA revival. And no one else was doing it at the time. And I was, quite proactive. I contacted them and said, I'm going to write a book about your music. Can I do interviews about you with you? And Bjorn and Benny said, yeah, because at the time probably they were a bit surprised that people were still interested in ABBA, and it was sort of puzzled by this renewed interest. So, and I sort of proved myself through, I guess, the seriousness, for want of a better word, of the work I was doing. So they've been wonderful, and um, it's not something I've ever taken for granted that they've been able to give me the access to all this stuff, and I listen to tapes and study documents and stuff like that.
Well, we're going to do something a little bit different today, and we've talked about this obviously to prepare for it. But I've looked up the top 10 songs, ABBA songs on Spotify, and I'm going to ask you about for a story about each that maybe we don't know, something unusual, because if you've done the definitive biography, then everything is in there. So I'm quite excited to find out what I don't know about ABBA, which I'm sure is a bit more than the audience don't know about ABBA. And certainly you know practically everything there is to know about ABBA. So the figures I'm going to give you are actually from the 2nd of October, 2024. So I'm going to go in reverse order. And at number 10 on Spotify, with the most listened to or the most streamed ABBA song, is Money, Money, Money. And the song gets 200,000 streams a day and a total of 263 million. So what don't we know about Money, Money, Money?
Well, you may not know that. Well, the thing to know about ABBA and how they went about making their music is that they always had like a working title, or usually had a working title. And the working title for this song was Money, Money, Money. But Bjorn, who was ABBA's main lyricist, he felt like, oh, there are so many money songs around, like, Money from Cabaret and Money by Pink Floyd. And he felt like, it's kind of worn concept. I have to think about something else. So he wrote lyrics, completely new lyrics entitled Gypsy Girl. So it had a kind of Romany theme to it. And they brought in a guy to play the violin, in the style of the cliched style of Romany music. And then they changed their minds again and said, well, actually, that money, money, money concept was much better, and it sounds good when you sing it, that title. So he changed it back to that, and that violin, you can only hear like 5 seconds of it. It was completely left out of the mix. So that's something you might not know about Money, Money, Money.
I mean, it's amazing how perfectionist they were, that they would, whatever they started on, they really went through until the end, until they were really happy with something.
Oh yeah, I mean they could take weeks to finish just one song. They really were perfectionist.
Okay, let's get to number 9. And these are the Spotify top 10 most streamed ABBA songs. And that one is Super Trooper, which gets 185,000 streams a day and over 313 million in total.
Yeah, Super Trooper has an interesting story because they were making an album at the time, the album that was eventually released as Super Trooper. And had, I think they had 9 songs and they were happy with them, but they felt, maybe we should, try to get, one more song, something that could be a really, really good single and really strong song here. Okay, so they went to the studio, Bjorn and Benny did, because they were pressed for time. So they usually didn't write songs in the studio. They usually wrote songs at home. But okay, we need to get this done. So they spent a couple of days writing this song in the studio, which had like a random Swedish working title. And, well, catchy, nice. They recorded the backing track on the 3rd of October, 1980. And on the same day, in the afternoon and evening, they were scheduled to do the photo session for the album, the untitled album that they were going to release. So they knew they were going to have a circus theme. So they went to this big studio, and there were circus performers and friends of theirs dressed up and blah blah blah. And there are lots of spotlights there. And then they got to think, oh, those spotlights, they remind me of those Super Troopers. Super Troopers is a registered trademark, is a brand name for gigantic spotlights that you use at stadium concerts and such. And someone said, oh, Super Trooper, that's quite a good name for the album. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, let's call the album Super Trooper. And then, of course, when Bjorn was going to write the lyrics for this new song, he felt, oh, maybe I could work that super. Oh, yeah, it fits. That title fits here. And then he sort of built this story around it. This person who's out on tour, and it's drudgery, and they're waiting for the loved one, and the Super Troopers lights are going to blind me, and you're in the audience, and now everything's all right. So that's how that happened. It happened very very last minute song.
So at number 8, and I should just mention that the figures are for October the 2nd, 2024, these Spotify figures. So the figures for the day are actually for October the 2nd, and the cumulative figure for 2024 is what I give you. So at number 8 is no surprise, really. It's Chiquitita. I can never say it. Chiquitita. There we go. Not the bananas, as you mentioned to me once. That is number 8. No surprise, but what don't we know about that song?
Well, it started life as a song with completely different lyrics. It was called "In the Arms of Rosalita," and the lyrics were sung from the point of view of this lady. She's singing to her husband or lover, or whatever, and says, "Okay, I know you're leaving me. I know you're with Rosalita now, but I'll have to warn you about her because she's a liar and a cheater, and you should stay away from her because I'm much better." For whatever reason, they didn't feel that this worked really well, so the lyrics were reworked, and Bjorn came up with this Chiquitita thing, and then they felt, okay, this is how it should sound and everything. They re-recorded the song completely, the backing track, everything. The melody was the same, lyrics and arrangement was slightly different.
I mean, In the Arms of Rosalita would have been easier to say, but Chiquitita is also a great title. I'd just give the figures 161,000 for October the 2nd, and for the whole of 2024, we're over 318 million. Now, to get on to number 7 for the most streamed ABBA songs. And of course, in this year, with 50 years of Eurovision, this one really isn't surprise. It's Waterloo. And Waterloo has 215,000 streams on October the 2nd and a cumulative total of 364 million. Waterloo, then, I mean, there can't be anything we don't know about Waterloo, especially this year.
No, that song has been talked about backwards and forwards, and it's kind of well known that when Stig Anderson, ABBA's manager, who wrote a lot of the lyrics in the early days, he was searching for a title, and just briefly he considered Honey Pie instead of Waterloo. He was looking for a three-syllable word, and he arrived at Waterloo eventually, and so on. What you might know, what the general public might not know, is that ABBA actually recorded Waterloo in a whopping 4 languages. ABBA, they always regarded themselves as an English language group because they felt, we're writing for the world. We're writing pop music that's going to work on the international market. Then you sing in English. But they did a Swedish version because they needed that to be able to compete in Melodifestivalen, the Swedish selection for the Eurovision Song Contest. And then at the time, in countries such as Germany and France and other places as well, for some reason they felt, oh, you stand a bigger chance of getting a hit here if you sing it in our language. So they did versions in German and French. But the funny thing was that those versions went nowhere on the charts. The Germans wanted the English version, the French wanted the English version as well. So that was all for naught. But it's kind of nice to have those kind of weird sort of left of center versions available now today to listen to Waterloo.
What difference does that make, in your opinion? Because you must have listened to all of them, and I just wonder, do you have a particular favorite, or is one of the languages more charming, or I don't know.
No, it's just, I mean, the word I was looking for was they're quaint, I would say, those German and French versions. I'd say the English version is the best one. If you're into vintage synthesizers and the Minimoog that was just coming to the fore at that time, you might prefer the Swedish version because the Minimoog is much louder there. So if you're one of those people, the Swedish version might be your favorite. I prefer the English version.
Okay, let's get to number 6 of the most streamed ABBA tracks on Spotify. This is for October the 2nd, 2024. That's Take a Chance on Me. And Take a Chance on Me on October the 2nd got 277,000 streams and has a cumulative total in 2024 of 412 million. I mean, it's a great song, but what don't we know about Take a Chance on Me?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's one of their best, certainly. Well, what don't you know? I keep coming back to these weird working titles they had because when they were writing the songs, they just strung together random English language phrases just to have words to sing while they was sort of getting the feel for the song. How does this sound? So I'm gonna have to read from a paper because the familiar phrase from Take a Chance on Me goes something like this. Have you heard the news? Did you hear it, Jack? Did you see him, Jack? Billy Boy is back. And they call it Billy Boy. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but it was words that they could sing. And I've heard a demo of them singing that. So that's how I know what the, so-called lyrics were.
Before we get to the top five, I just want to mention a couple of songs which aren't in the top 10 at all. And they are, I think, quite a surprise. Fernando, which was at number 14, and my favorite ABBA song, which is never in the top 10, but it's the one that I like, The Day Before You Came, which is at number 36. So let's talk a little bit more about the definitive biography of ABBA. How important has it been for you in your life to be part of this continuing ABBA legacy?
Well, it's become my life's work. I never thought it was going to become my life's work when I started it. It was just let's try to do this book about their music and see where that leads me. And then it turned out that it was a need for someone like me who was interested in researching ABBA and keeping track of the details and facts and stories and all that. Um, what can I say? It's been amazing. It hasn't always been fun, but no work is always fun. It's been terrible sometimes. Horrible things have happened to me during the course of my work, but for the most part, it's been great, and I'm proud, if I may be so conceited, that I have had a certain amount of impact on the way ABBA stories is told and what we know and what we don't know about ABBA. I think I've sort of dug up a few things that were long forgotten or completely unknown, and that we now all know, which is, um, that feels pretty good.
I mean, what is the continuing fascination of a band that effectively split in 82? Obviously, with everything that's gone on, particularly in recent years, then we're continuing to have ABBA revivals from different areas, from theatre productions, from films, from them recording a new album, from what is happening in London with these avatars and so on and so forth. But what do you think is the continuing fascination with the music of ABBA?
Well, I think I have a very simplistic answer to that. The music was good. We mentioned previously here that they were perfectionists and they were worked, for a very long time on each and every song they recorded. And changed the lyrics, changed the melodies, moved things around, went back to the drawing board to do it all over again if they were unhappy with the final result, and so on. And I think that's, they have so many songs that people still remember. Most of the acts from way back, they're lucky if people remember, two or three songs. I think if you ask the man or woman in the street, they would probably be able to mention at least 20 ABBA songs without any major difficulties. And so that I think that's the part of it. And also, there's a kind of mystery about ABBA because they've been as people, they've been so guarded in terms of their personalities. They haven't been very ongoing. They ongoing, yes, they have been, but they haven't been very outgoing, I was going to say. And so there's a tension there between this very accessible music and these people who have been perhaps not so accessible to the general public.
Yeah, maybe because their music speaks for them rather than them speaking for their music, in a sense, if I can put it in that way. Let's get to number 5 of these Spotify streams from 2024, and the figures are from October the 2nd. I mean, they're massive figures. And when we look at the number 5, The Winner Takes It All, we're already up to 225,000 for October the 2nd, and a cumulative figure for 2024 of 433 million. The Winner Takes It All, another, track that is impregnated into the minds of everyone, I would say. But what don't we know about that?
Well, you may not know. Again, I'm talking about working titles. It was called The Story of My Life, well, when they wrote it. And they actually recorded a backing track. The first backing track they recorded for the tune was much more metrical. It was more stiffer. It was like a, 1, 2, 3, 4 pop song that just went on like that. And they had recorded it, and on the car, in the car on the way home, they had like a cassette tape of the backing track they'd recorded, Bjorn and Benny had, and they were sort of listening to it. It's not quite right, we need to do we need to remake this. And they did that a few days later, and in the interim, Benny had come up with this da 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 da, that piano thing, and sort of it became much looser, more free flowing, a bit like a French chanson. And they even recorded a version of it with Bjorn on, just random French phrases that don't make any sense at all, just to get the feel for it. And so that's the arrangement they then used for what became The Winner Takes It All.
The top 4 are still to come, so stick with this interview with Carl Magnus Palm. Just time for me to ask you to become a member. If you join membership level 2, it's called 2 Tribes, you'll be able to watch each new interview earlier than non-members. Okay, the other things you can do, you can comment, you can subscribe, and you can like the videos. And don't forget, there is a massive archive of videos on www.popthehistorymakers.com. So Lay All Your Love on Me is at number 4, and on October the 2nd, 2024, it had 394,000 streams and a cumulative total for the year of 497 million. What don't we know about Lay All Your Love on Me?
Well, it is an interesting song from so many aspects, I think. Like 30 years ago, I don't think Lay All Your Love on Me was that big of a song. But I think it's one of those songs that explains why ABBA are so popular with younger generations, because if it's so electronic, it's drenched in synthesizers, and therefore it sounds. I mean, you can tell that it was recorded a long time ago, but it also sounds a bit similar to the computer created music of today, which is very electronic and synthesized and all that. So that I think is part of why ABBA have, they have such a lease on of life with a younger generation. If we should talk about the song as such, it's a tiny anecdote is. There's a line in there, or 2 lines, which I used to think that was sensible. It makes the truth even more incomprehensible. And that was Bjorn's, a tiny nod from Bjorn to the Logical Song by Supertramp, which had been a hit in 1979. And if you remember the lyrics to that, it's all just, adjectives and adverbs that rhyme, and Bjorn kind of liked that. So it was a little nod, a little tip of the hat to the Logical Song by Supertramp.
So that is something that 100% I didn't know, and really fascinating, I think. So let's get to number 3 for the Spotify Top 10 of 2024. And we get to, yes, of course, Mamma Mia. It had 364,000 streams on October the 2nd and 602 million for the year. So what don't we know about Mamma Mia when we've, had the stage show, the movie. We've heard the song for years. I think there cannot be that much that we don't know about Mamma Mia.
Well, no, probably not. It depends. But well, one thing that people often get wrong, they spell the song title Mama, M-A-M-A, Mia, when it should be M-A-M-M-A, a double M there. And it doesn't refer to a mother called Mia. It's an expression, Mamma Mia, an Italian expression that means like, heavens or, oh dear or whatever. It's like one of those. So that's what it refers to, and some people, many people haven't seemed to picked up on that, although it's quite obvious from the lyrics. Um, Apart from that, it's one of those their kind of adventurousness, for want of a better word, in the studio. It starts with this tick-tocking marimba, that kind of thing. And that was, I think, like a last-minute addition or something, because they wanted something to sort of lift the song, and Benny happened to notice in the studio, oh, there's a marimba there. Let's see if I can use that and make something interesting with that. So one of the signature sounds of Mamma Mia was, it was on a whim, when they were exploring the possibilities of the recording studio, basically.
That is the song I think that Janus Schäfer said when he played, he's one of the guitarists in ABBA. But when this song was created, this was the then ABBA sound. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Jan is onto something there, and their sound engineer, ABBA sound engineer Michael B. Tretto, who was like a co-producer almost. I remember he said to me one time when I interviewed him, he felt like Mamma Mia is the whole idea of ABBA in one track. It's kind of symbolizes everything that ABBA were about, and I know it was like Benny has talked about that it was a milestone recording for them because previously they had sort of, okay, the musicians, you play the drums, you play the guitar, you play the bass, and we all, strumming along and da 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 da. And Mamma Mia was the first sort of fully arranged song where they said, okay, the guitar line is going to be like that, and the bass line is going to be like that, and we're going to have this break here in the chorus where we just have the vocals and the piano and the strings, and then we're going to come back. So it was like he described it as a eureka moment for him. It's like, oh, you can do it this way. You can arrange it a little more tightly, and the song will benefit from that.
I can't believe actually we're already at number two. And this for me is not a surprise that it really is way up there. Because it's Gimme, Gimme, Gimme. And on October the 2nd, 2024, according to Spotify, there were 483,000 streams. And here we go with the totals going wild, 842 million cumulative total for the year. So Gimme, 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 A Man After Midnight. What don't we know about that?
Well, like so many ABBA songs, it had quite a different arrangement to start with. I've heard a rehearsal because when they were creating "Gimme Gimme Gimme," they were about to go on tour. So I've heard a tape from a live rehearsal where this song figured under the title "Been and Gone and Done It." And the lyrics were about this woman who doesn't believe in matrimony, and yet she finds herself at the altar and getting married despite all her doubts about marriage. I have to say, those lyrics were kind of contrived, and the arrangement of the song was completely different as well. It was kind of rocky, it was a rock song. So, another instance where they felt like, we didn't quite get it right here. Let's do something else. And then they did this disco number, and it became "Gimme, Gimme, Gimme."
I mean, of course, it had another life as well because of Madonna. Um, how did Madonna approach ABBA, And also, what was their reaction? Because Madonna, you can sometimes see on Instagram, has said in the early days that she didn't really think much of ABBA. And then, of course, later on, she said how much she liked them.
Yeah, I guess she must have changed her mind. Um, she was recording this album with the producer Stuart Price, who's worked with the Pet Shop Boys and many others. And I think it was his idea. He had always wanted to do a track with a sample from that synthesizer intro from Gimme, Gimme, Gimme. And so they did this track, and they contacted ABBA and said, "Can we use this sample, please?" And ABBA, they are notoriously, they always say no to samples. They've only said no two or three times in total. They were sorry, they only said yes two or three times in total. And and they said, "Well, we want to hear it first, so can you send a file?" And Madonna didn't want to do that, so she sent her assistant with a letter from Madonna, a handwritten letter from Madonna, where she said, "Oh, I love you so much, and your music is so great, and it would be such an honor, blah, blah, blah." And they took a listen, and they said afterwards, we only had to listen a few bars to sort of decide that, okay, this is a great track. We'll say yes to this. And if I'm honest, I also think, I don't know this, but I think that one of the reasons they said yes was that Madonna was already an established artist. This wasn't a case of some up and coming person, performer who wanted to ride on the coattails of ABBA, so to speak, to get a hit. She had already proven that she could create hits with or without ABBA. And I think they were flattered as well, because such a famous, an artist that meant so much to the audience of today, so to speak, wanted to sample them.
I mean, you mentioned established artists, and that maybe gave them a different view. But have you talked to them about why they would be reticent of people using samples, or have you got an opinion on that? Do you think it's because they may feel that their original quality of what they did is then watered down?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I also think they believe that, well, create your own music. Don't take ours. Go on, be creative by yourselves and come up with something new instead of reusing something that was made 30, 40, 50 years ago. So that's their attitude. If you're in the music business, create your own music.
Okay, we've got to number one. That's gone pretty quick, I would say. Okay, it's so obvious, but tell me, what's number one?
I would hazard a guess that it's Dancing Queen.
You'd be right. And Dancing Queen, yes, it's the most listened to ABBA stream on Spotify. And these figures were taken from October the 2nd, 2024. 983,000 a day. And then we get to these crazy figures, 1.4 billion streams. I just think it's completely amazing. What don't we know about Dancing Queen?
Well, Dancing Queen also had a very, odd working title. It was called Boogaloo. The interesting thing about Dancing Queen is they started recording it in August 1975, but it wasn't released as a single until a year later. And that was partly because they took their time with it. They were getting more and more ambitious, and they re-edited the song. For instance, originally it started with a verse that they felt, it's a bit meh. Let's remove it completely from the song, and then they took what was originally the third verse, moved that to the start, so that became the first verse, and they snipped and moved things around. One of the most famous sounds on Dancing Queen is Benny's piano. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. That was about the last thing they added. So they worked on that song for several months, but it was ready to be released in early 1976. But then they had another song that was ready to be released at the same time, and that was Fernando. So it's like, okay, should we go with Fernando or Dancing Queen? And they decided, okay, let's get Fernando out of the way, and we can release Dancing Queen later in the year. So that's why it took such a long time. And I think that must be. I don't think there's another ABBA song where they took such a long time, between starting recording it and then actually releasing it.
Okay, now the paperback version, the updated paperback version, I would say, of the updated version of the book now in paperback, Bright Lights, Dark Shadows, the definitive biography of ABBA. Where can people buy this book?
Well, it's the publication date is October 17th, and you should be able to get it everywhere you buy your books. Your favorite online bookshops should be stocking it. So, and hopefully some of the regular bookshops in the street as well will have it. But it shouldn't be difficult to get at all.
Do you think that people like yourself who have promoted ABBA through their work, through their books, or through talking on shows and their knowledge, have also been part of the revival of ABBA and have contributed to that success? Do you see yourself in that sense as well?
That's hard to say. To a tiny extent, perhaps. Um, I mean, ABBA's music speaks for itself, and that's what attracts people. If in some way, I've helped people take ABBA a bit more seriously, because they were back in the day often dismissed as superficial bubblegum pop. And in the 80s, after the ABBA era, their stock was very low, and their music was sold as mid-price CDs, shoddily packaged ones at that. Um, so if I've done anything, I've sort of not exactly ignored the platform shoes and the crazy costumes, but I've sort of pointed, well, there's something else going on here. There's a story here. These are serious people that do serious work. They're taking their music seriously, and that is actually why you still like it today.
If you want to get a signed copy, how do you get that? If you want to go online before and try and get a signed copy from you?
Yeah, you can get that if you order your copy from a bookstore here in Sweden called the English Bookshop.
Okay, I'll give a
Um,
link for that below. Yeah.
yeah, excellent. So if you click on that link and go to that bookshop and order your copy of that, I will sign it for you. For instance, if you would order a copy of that book, I would sign it to Steve and then my signature. So it would be personalized, a little something extra for you.
Yeah, brilliant. And well, I mean, I think it's a great idea to update the definitive biography because it's so ongoing. And one thing that maybe you don't know, that when I was at MTV, I remember asking why we don't play ABBA. And I think, and I may get the words a little bit wrong, but I was basically told that they were out and they were not MTV until I did that interview in the early 90s. And also, of course, because of Erasure, Bjorn Again, and all those bands who were covering ABBA at that era. And so I think it's really fascinating that what was once seen as something that you do not touch has become such a phenomenal success years later.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And that interview you did with Bjorn and Benny in 1992, that was one of the first interviews made with them as the revival was it was bubbling under, it was growing. So I remember that very well, because I remember thinking, okay, something's going on here, ABBA are on their way back. And yeah, it was a great interview.
Oh, I'm not sure about that, but deservedly so. They're on the way back. And thanks, Carl Magnus Palm. It's always brilliant to talk to you. And good luck with the paper version of the book, Bright Lights, Dark Shadows, the definitive biography of ABBA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.